The chamber was impossibly vast. Ambassador David Cross stood alone on a floating platform at the center of a space so large that clouds formed near its ceiling. Around him, rising in endless tiers that disappeared into darkness, sat the representatives of over 900 alien species. Some had bodies made of living crystal. Others floated as clouds of shimmering gas. A few were so strange that his human mind could not even process what he was seeing. This was the Grand Assembly of the Galactic Council, the governing body that controlled 10,000 worlds across 100,000 light years, the most powerful organization in the known universe, and David Cross was the first human being to ever stand before it. The journey here had taken 3 months. A strange ship had appeared above Earth without warning, carrying a single message. Humanity was summoned. There was no choice. There was no negotiation. Earth would send a representative, or Earth would be collected by force. So here he stood, a 47-year-old diplomat from a small planet at the edge of the galaxy, alone, unarmed, facing powers that could destroy his entire civilization with a single command. The Supreme Chancellor spoke. His name was Vorthen, and his body was made of stone that moved like water. His voice echoed through translation devices that made every word understandable to every species. Present. Species designation 7412. Identification. Human. Origin world. Earth. Status. Primitive uncontacted civilization. You have been brought before this assembly to receive judgment. David said nothing. He had been trained for high-pressure negotiations. He had faced hostile governments and angry crowds. But nothing could have prepared him for this. He focused on breathing, on staying calm, on watching and learning. Around him, the alien representatives murmured to each other. Some pointed at him with limbs he could not name. Others laughed, if their species could laugh. He was a curiosity, an insect brought before gods. The hegemony of Kroth has filed formal claim to your solar system, Vorthen continued. Under Galactic Law Section 7.432, undeveloped worlds may be claimed for resource extraction and population labor. Your species will be relocated to work camps in the outer territories. A holographic display appeared beside David. It showed a fleet of warships, thousands of them, each one the size of a small moon, each one carrying weapons that could crack a planet in half. The Krath invasion fleet will arrive at your world in 20 of your planetary rotations. This assembly grants formal approval for the conquest. This audience serves only as notification. The chamber fell silent. Every eye, every sensor, every form of perception was fixed on the small human standing at the center of the room. They expected him to beg. Every other primitive species brought here had begged. They had wept. They had offered prayers to gods that did not exist. They had collapsed in despair upon learning their fate. David Cross did something different. He smiled. It was a small smile, polite, almost apologetic. The kind of smile you might give someone who has made a terrible mistake. I need to make a call, he said. Vorthen's stone face shifted in confusion. A call? To my government. They need to hear this directly. Before we respond. The Chancellor looked at his advisors. This was irregular, but there was no rule against it. What harm could a primitive species do with a simple communication? Granted. David pulled a small device from his pocket. It should not have worked across such vast distances, but months of secret preparation had placed relay stations along his route. The call connected instantly. The face of Defense Minister Anna Weber appeared on the massive display screens surrounding the chamber. She was a stern woman with gray hair and cold eyes. Behind her, David could see a room full of military officers and government officials. Ambassador Cross. Report. Minister Weber, I am standing before the Galactic Council. They have informed me that an alien empire called the Hegemony of Kraph is planning to invade Earth in 20 days. They have thousands of warships. They expect us to surrender and accept relocation to labor camps. Silence. The 900 species watching from the tiers leaned forward. This was the moment the primitive would break. This was the moment his species would accept their fate. Anna Weber's expression did not change. They are invading Earth. Yes, Minister. They are invading us. Correct. She nodded slowly. Then she turned to someone off-screen and gave a quiet order. When she faced the camera again, something in her eyes had changed. Something old and cold and dangerous. Ambassador Cross, please inform the Galactic Council that Earth formally rejects their terms. The chamber stirred. Furthermore, please inform the Hegemony of Kraph that as of this moment, a state of war exists between their empire and the human species. Any hostile action against Earth will be met with total retaliation. Any species that aids the Kraph in their invasion will be considered an enemy of humanity and treated accordingly. The stirring became chaos. Vorthen's stone body cracked with something that might have been shock. You cannot declare war on the Hegemony. They have conquered 40 worlds. They have never been defeated. Anna Weber looked directly at the camera, directly at the 900 species watching, directly at the Kraph representatives who were screaming in outrage somewhere in the upper tiers. Then they have never faced humanity. Earth out. The transmission ended. David Cross turned back to face the assembly. The chaos was growing. Species were shouting at each other. Security forces were moving toward him. The Kraph ambassador, a massive creature covered in black armor, was demanding immediate execution. But some of the older species were not shouting. The ancient ones. The observers who had watched civilizations rise and fall for millions of years. They were silent. They were studying David with something that looked almost like fear. One of them, a being of pure light that called itself the Witness, spoke for the first time in 10,000 years. What have you done? David looked up at the creature. What do you mean? We have seen that look before. In the eyes of species that burned empires to ash. In the eyes of those who would rather die than surrender. The Witness flickered. What are you? David thought about his family back on Earth, his children, his grandchildren. He thought about the billions of people who were, at this very moment, learning that they had 20 days to prepare for an invasion. He thought about human history, the wars, the suffering, the endless capacity for violence that his species had developed over thousands of years. Violence they had always used against each other because they had no one else to fight. We are human, he said simply, and you just gave us a reason to stop fighting ourselves. He turned and walked toward the exit. Behind him, the Galactic Council descended into chaos, and on Earth, buried beneath mountains and hidden in secret facilities across the world, weapons that were never supposed to exist began to power up. Humanity had 20 days. It would be enough. The Kraph invasion fleet was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. 15,000 warships moved through space like a swarm of metal insects. Each vessel bristled with weapons capable of melting continents. Each carried thousands of soldiers bred for conquest. At the head of this armada flew the flagship Devastator, and on its bridge stood High Commander Thorn, the most feared warrior in the Hegemony. Thorn had personally conquered 12 worlds. He had crushed rebellions that lasted centuries. He had never known defeat. His body was covered in the scars of 100 battles, and his eyes held the cold patience of a predator. Report, he commanded. His tactical officer, a smaller craft named Vex, studied the sensor displays. We will exit faster than light travel in 6 hours. Earth lies directly ahead. No significant resistance detected. Thorn allowed himself a rare smile. This would be the easiest conquest of his career. The humans had no space fleet, no orbital defenses, no allies. They were primitives clinging to a single planet, and they had somehow convinced themselves they could fight the hegemony. The galaxy was watching. The Galactic Council had positioned observation drones throughout the system to record the invasion. This would serve as a lesson to every other primitive species who might dream of resistance. "Prepare the bombardment protocols," Thorn ordered. "We will break their cities first. Then we will collect the survivors." 6 hours later, the Krath fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Bev, Earth's solar system, and found nothing. Vex stared at his sensors in confusion. "Commander, this is strange. We are detecting no transmissions, no satellite activity, no signs of the primitive civilization at all." Thorn frowned. "Perhaps they fled." "Impossible. They have no faster-than-light capability. They are trapped in their own system. Then they hide." Like prey, Thorn settled back in his command chair. "No matter. Begin approach." Standard invasion formation. The fleet moved forward. 15,000 ships arranged themselves into a perfect wedge, with the Devastator at the center. They passed the outer planets without incident. They moved past the gas giants and their frozen moons. Everything was silent. Too silent. Thorn was beginning to feel something he had not felt in decades. Unease. This was wrong. Every other species they had invaded had filled the void with desperate communications. Pleas for mercy. Demands for negotiation. Prayers to whatever gods they believed in. The humans were silent. They were halfway through the asteroid belt when the first ship exploded. It happened without warning. One moment, the cruiser Judgment was flying in perfect formation. The next, it ceased to exist in a sphere of white-hot destruction. Then another ship died. And another. And another. Vex screamed at his sensors. "Contact! Multiple contacts. The attacks are coming from the asteroid belt." Thorn leaped to his feet. "What weapons?" "Unknown. Small projectiles, moving at incredible speed. We cannot track them until they impact. There are thousands of them." The fleet broke formation as ships desperately tried to evade the invisible death raining down on them. But the projectiles moved at nearly the speed of light. By the time a ship detected one, it was already dead. 500 ships burned in the first 10 minutes. Thorn watched in disbelief as his invincible armada came apart around him. "How?" he demanded. "How can primitives have such weapons?" The answer came in a burst of communication from Earth. A human face peered on the screen. Male, old, wearing a military uniform covered in medals. "Hi, Commander Thorn. My name is General Thomas Ward. I am the Supreme Commander of Earth's Defense Forces." Thorn snarled at the screen. "You dare attack us? You will be crushed. Your world will burn." Ward's expression did not change. "You misunderstand the situation, Commander. We have had 20 days to prepare. But we did not need 20 days. We have been preparing for this moment for decades." The display changed, showing a map of the solar system. The asteroid belt was highlighted in red. "We call it Project Ragnarok." Hidden weapons platforms distributed throughout the asteroid belt. Railguns that accelerate tungsten rods to relativistic speeds. Millions of projectiles, each one capable of destroying a capital ship. Ward paused. "You are flying through a minefield, Commander. And we have been mining this field since before your grandmother was born." Thorn felt something cold in his chest. "Impossible. You did not know we were coming." "We did not know who was coming. But we knew someone would." Ward smiled grimly. "We humans have spent our entire history fighting each other. We developed weapons that could end our own civilization. Nuclear bombs, biological weapons, things that scared us so much we stopped using them. But we never stopped making them. The view changed again, showing orbital defense stations hidden behind Earth's moon, showing submarine bases on the ocean floor, showing underground facilities buried beneath mountains. When we looked up at the stars, we did not see hope. We saw potential enemies. So we prepared, quietly, secretly. We built weapon systems throughout our entire solar system, waiting for the day when something hostile came knocking. Ward leaned forward. Congratulations, Commander. You are the first aliens to visit our system. I hope you survived the experience. The transmission ended. Thorne stood frozen on his bridge as his fleet died around him. 800 ships had been destroyed in the time the human was speaking. The asteroid belt was a killing ground, and they were trapped in the middle of it. Full retreat. He screamed, "Get us out of this system." Vex's voice shook. "Commander, we cannot. Our faster-than-light drives are not responding." "What?" "Something is interfering with our jump capability. We cannot escape." Thorne's blood ran cold. He looked at the display showing Earth, the small blue planet that was supposed to be easy prey, the primitive world that was supposed to surrender without a fight. They had not just walked into a trap. They had walked into a cage, and now the door had closed behind them. The Kroth invasion fleet continued its desperate push toward Earth. They lost 2,000 ships in the asteroid belt. They lost another 1,000 to defense platforms hidden around the outer planets. When they finally reached Earth orbit, less than 9,000 ships remained. But it was enough. Still enough to glass the planet. Still enough to break the humans. Thorne ordered the bombardment to begin. The first wave of plasma. Strikes fell on Earth's surface. Cities burned. Mountains crumbled. Billions of people fled underground, into bunkers that had been prepared in secret. But the humans did not surrender. Instead, something rose from the dark side of the moon. Ships, human ships. Crude and ugly compared to Krath elegance, but armed with weapons that should not exist. 500 human vessels against 9,000 Krath warships. And as Thorne watched in horror, the human fleet accelerated directly toward his position. They were not fleeing. They were attacking. Admiral Rachel Stone sat in the command chair of the battleship Defiance. Around her, the bridge crew worked with silent efficiency. Ahead, through the reinforced viewports, she could see the Krath fleet filling the sky like a wall of angry metal. 9,000 ships against 500. The odds were absurd. Suicidal. Impossible. She smiled. "All ships," she said calmly. "Weapons free. Show them what humanity is made of." The human fleet opened fire. It was not supposed to work. The Krath had shields that could deflect plasma strikes and energy beams. Their armor was designed to withstand the most advanced weapons in the galaxy, but human weapons were not advanced. Human weapons were simple, brutal, designed by a species that had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing. Railgun rounds punched through Krath shields like they were paper. Nuclear missiles detonated against hulls, overloading systems with electromagnetic pulses. Kinetic penetrators accelerated by captured alien. Technology slammed into engine cores and ammunition magazines. The Krath fired back. Their weapons were devastating. Human ships died. Men and women were vaporized in an instant. Their lives erased by weapons designed for genocide. But for every human ship that fell, 10 Krath vessels burned. High. Commander Thorne watched from the Devastator as his fleet was systematically dismantled. His officers screamed reports of destruction. His tactical displays showed ship after ship going dark. "This is impossible," he whispered. "They are primitives. How can primitives fight like this?" His tactical officer Vex was covered in blood from a nearby explosion. "Commander, we must retreat. We are being slaughtered. We cannot retreat. The jump drives still do not work. Then we must surrender." Thorn turned on his subordinate with fury in his eyes. "The hegemony does not surrender. We have never surrendered. I would rather die than be the first." He turned back to the display. The human flagship was cutting through his fleet like a blade through flesh. It was heading directly for him. All remaining ships converge on the enemy flagship. Destroy it at any cost. What remained of the craft fleet turned toward the Defiance. Over 4,000 vessels focused their fire on a single human ship. Admiral Stone felt her ship shudder as hundreds of weapons struck home. Warning lights flashed across her bridge. Reports flooded in from every section. Hull breaches, casualties, system failures. "Shields at 30%, her tactical officer reported. "We cannot sustain this much longer." Stone watched the Devastator on her display. It was pulling back, hiding behind its own fleet. The coward was using his ships as a wall. "All ships, fall back to defensive positions around Earth. Defiance will continue the attack." Her communications officer looked up in shock. "Admiral, if we advance alone, we will be destroyed." "I know." Stone's voice was steady. "But I am going to take that flagship with me. Begin evacuation of non-essential personnel. Transfer them to the escape pods." "Admiral." "That is an order." The Defiance broke away from the human fleet and accelerated toward the enemy. Alone, 4,000 craft ships turned to face her. Thousands of weapons fired. The ship screamed as its armor was stripped away, layer by layer. But it kept coming. On the Devastator, Thorn watched the human ship approach with growing terror. It was dying. It was burning. Half of it was exposed to space dot, and it was still firing. Still accelerating. Still coming for him. Destroy it. He screamed. Why will it not die? The Defiance slammed into his defensive line at full speed. It crashed through 3 cruisers, ramming them with its damaged hull. It fired its last missiles point-blank into the ships surrounding the flagship, and then, with its final breath, the Defiance aimed itself directly at the Devastator. Thorn realized what was happening too late. He opened his mouth to give an order, but there was no time. The human battleship struck the Devastator at relativistic speed. The collision was so violent that it created a temporary miniature sun. Both ships were vaporized instantly. Admiral Rachel Stone died with her hands on the controls and a smile on her face. Across the system, the human fleet watched their flagship disappear in a ball of fire. For a moment, there was silence. Then Captain Michael Ross, now the senior surviving officer, gave a single command. "Avenge them." The human fleet attacked with renewed fury. Without their leader, the Krath forces fell into confusion. They had never lost a high commander in battle. They had never faced an enemy willing to sacrifice everything for victory. The battle lasted 6 more hours. When it ended, not a single Krath ship remained operational. Some had been destroyed. Others had surrendered, their crews too terrified to continue. Fighting. 9,000 warships of the mightiest military. Power in the galaxy had been defeated by 500 human. Vessels and the weapons hidden. Throughout the solar system. But the cost was terrible. 3 billion humans had died in the bombardment. Entire continents were scarred and burning. Cities that had stood for centuries were reduced to radioactive ash. General Thomas Ward looked at the reports from his bunker beneath what used to be Switzerland. His hands shook. His eyes were red with exhaustion and grief. "How many ships do we have left?" 87, sir. "Most are damaged. How many prisoners?" "Approximately 200,000 Krath. Their ships are disabled but intact." Ward nodded slowly. The alien technology would be invaluable. Within months, they could reverse engineer faster than light travel. Within years, they could build a real fleet. What about the Galactic Council? Any response? His communications officer pulled up a recording. This just came in, sir. The display showed the Grand Assembly in complete chaos. Species were screaming at each other. Some were demanding immediate retaliation against Earth. Others were demanding distance from the situation, afraid of what humans might do next. But one voice cut through the noise. Ambassador David Cross, still standing on his platform at the center of the chamber. This council sanctioned the invasion of Earth. 831 species voted to approve our destruction. The hegemony of Krath has now been defeated. He paused, letting that sink in. Humanity is no longer a primitive species begging for mercy. We are a galactic power, and we have a very good memory. What does that mean? Demanded Chancellor VOR then Cross looked directly at him. It means we know who voted yes, and we are going to have a very long conversation about consequences. The transmission ended. General Ward stared at the frozen image of his ambassador. Then he turned to his staff. Begin construction of a new fleet. Use everything we captured from the Krath. I want 100 ships ready within a year. What are we going to do with them, sir? Ward thought about the 3 billion people who had died. He thought about the cities that no longer existed. He thought about the children who would never grow up because an empire on the other side of the galaxy had decided they were not worth saving. We are going to remind the galaxy, he said slowly, that there are consequences for attacking humanity. The next chapter of human history was about to begin, and it would be written in fire. 5 years had passed since the Battle of Earth. In those 5 years, humanity had changed. The species that once fought endless wars among themselves had become something unified, something focused, something terrifying. The first human faster-than-light ship had launched 18 months after the invasion. Within 3 years, Earth had a fleet of 2,000 vessels. Each one was built using stolen Krath technology, but improved with human innovation. They were faster, tougher, and more heavily armed than anything the galaxy had ever seen. And now that fleet had a mission. Ambassador David Cross stood before the Galactic Council once more. But this time, he did not stand alone. Behind him, holographic displays showed human warships positioned throughout Council space. A reminder, a warning. 5 years ago, this body voted to approve the destruction of my species, Cross said. His voice was calm, but there was iron underneath it. 831 of you decided that humanity should be enslaved or exterminated. Today, I am here to discuss the consequences. Chancellor Vorthen shifted uncomfortably on his throne. The past 5 years had aged him visibly. His stone body was cracked in places that had been smooth before. Ambassador Cross, the Council has already expressed its regret over the incident. The hegemony of Krath acted beyond their authority. Their defeat was their own responsibility. Their defeat was our responsibility, Cross corrected. And it was not enough. He pulled up a list. 831 names. 831 species that had voted yes. We have spent 5 years investigating each of these votes. We know which species voted yes because they believed it was right. We know which voted yes because they were afraid of the Krath. We know which voted yes because they hoped to share in the spoils. Cross, let that sink in. Humanity is not interested in vengeance against those who were coerced. We understand fear. We understand weakness. But those who actively supported our destruction, those who volunteered ships and soldiers to help the Krath, those who planned to take human slaves as rewards. His voice hardened. They will answer for their choices. A ripple of fear passed through the chamber. "You cannot do this," shouted the representative of the Corvani Empire, a species that had sent 100 ships to support the Krath invasion. "We are a sovereign nation. The Council will protect us." Cross turned to face the Corvani directly. The Council could not protect itself from a single primitive species with no faster-than-light capability. "What makes you think they can protect you from what we have become?" He turned back to the assembly. "Here is what is going to happen. The 16 species that actively supported the Krath invasion will face trial before a Terran tribunal. Those found guilty will have their governments dissolved and their military capabilities eliminated. They will be permitted to rebuild under human supervision." "This is conquest," screamed the Corvani. "No," Cross replied. "Conquest would be what you tried to do to us. This is justice. There is a difference, though I do not expect your species to understand it. Over the next 3 years, the Terran Tribunal conducted its work. Human fleets visited each of the 16 species that had supported the invasion. Those that cooperated received relatively light sentences. Their governments were reformed. Their weapons were confiscated. They were given the opportunity to prove they could be trusted. Those that resisted learned what human war looked like. The Corvani Empire was the worst offender. They had sent ships to the invasion. They had lobbied for human enslavement. Their leaders had already planned how they would divide human territory among themselves. When the human fleet arrived at their homeworld, the Corvani refused to surrender. They had rebuilt their military in secret. They believed they could fight. The war lasted 3 months. When it ended, the Corvani Empire no longer existed. Their homeworld was occupied. Their colonies were under human control. Their species would spend the next century rebuilding from nothing. General Thomas Ward, now in his 70s, but still commanding from the front, addressed his officers after the final battle. "I want it understood that we do not enjoy this. We did not seek this war, but we will not permit anyone to threaten Earth again. If that means we must become the thing the galaxy fears, then so be it." Across the galaxy, species watched in terrified fascination as humanity established a new order. The Galactic Council still existed, but it was fundamentally changed. Human representatives held permanent seats on every major committee. Human ships patrolled trade routes. Human technology spread to allied species willing to work with the new power dot. It was not conquest in the traditional sense. Humanity had not claimed territory or demanded tribute. Instead, they had claimed something more valuable. They had claimed fear. Ambassador Cross, now the senior human diplomat in the galaxy, was giving a speech at a ceremony commemorating the 10th anniversary of the invasion when the emergency transmission arrived. It came from beyond the galactic rim, from a region of space that no known species had ever explored. The transmission was simple. A single image. A single message. The image showed a fleet. Not thousands of ships. Not hundreds of thousands. Millions. An armada so vast that it stretched across light years. Ships so ancient that their design predated the formation of most galaxies. The message was even simpler. We wake. We come. Cross stared at the image. Around him, the celebration had stopped. Every being present was frozen in shock. "What is this?" Someone whispered. "An ancient species?" One of the observers who had watched civilization rise and fall for billions of years stepped forward. Its body flickered with fear. "They are called the Silence. They are older than the stars. They sleep for eons, awakening only to feed. The last time they woke, they consumed an empire that spanned multiple galaxies." Cross felt his blood run cold. "How do we stop them?" The observer looked at him with something like pity. "You do not. No one has ever stopped the Silence. When they wake, civilizations end. When they feed, Species ceased to exist. It paused. You humans are impressive. You defeated the Krath. You terrified the galaxy. But the silence is not the Krath. They are not an enemy you can fight with ships and weapons. They are extinction given form. Cross thought about everything humanity had achieved, the wars they had won, the enemies they had defeated, the empire they had built from nothing, all of it meaningless against what was coming. Then he thought about something else, about human history, about every time humanity had faced impossible odds, about every time they had been told something could not be done. You may be right, he said slowly. The silence may be unstoppable. They may be the end of everything. He looked at the image of the approaching fleet. Millions of ships, billions of soldiers, a force that had destroyed civilizations beyond counting. But if we are going to die, we are going to die fighting. And maybe, just maybe, we will find a way to win. He turned to the stunned assembly. Humanity calls for a galactic alliance. Every species that wants to survive, unite with us. Share your knowledge. Share your resources. Share your soldiers. Together, we face the silence. He paused. Separately, we die. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, one by one, representatives began to step forward. Species that had been enemies. Species that had tried to destroy each other. Species that had nothing in common except the desire to survive. The alliance was forming. The galaxy was uniting, and in the darkness beyond the rim, the silence continued its approach. The coalition fleet gathered at the edge of known space. 600 species had answered humanity's call. Warships from every corner of the galaxy formed a defensive line that stretched across 3 star systems. 3 million vessels against 2 billion. Admiral James Cole stood on the yacht, bridge of the Alliance flagship Unity. He was 38 years old. He had never lost a battle, but he had never faced anything like this. The Silence Fleet filled the entire horizon. Ships so ancient that their hulls were covered in the dust of dead stars. Ships so vast that they carried ecosystems inside them. Ships that had been destroying civilizations since before Earth's sun was born. All stations report ready, his tactical officer said quietly. Cole nodded. Around him, his bridge crew tried to hide their fear. They failed. Everyone was afraid. The difference between a coward and a hero was simply what you did with that fear. Open a channel to all coalition forces. The communication display lit up. Thousands of faces appeared. Humans, Valani, Corvani, species that had been enemies a decade ago, now standing together. This is Admiral Cole. In a few minutes, we will engage the largest hostile force in the history of the galaxy. Many of us will not survive. Perhaps none of us will. He paused. But we fight anyway. Not because we expect to win. Not because we have a secret weapon that will save us. We fight because that is what sentient beings do when faced with extinction. We fight because surrender is not in our nature. He thought about Earth, about the billions who had died in the Krath invasion, about the children who had been born since, growing up in a galaxy that humanity had remade through blood and sacrifice. If we fall today, we fall together. And whatever comes after, whatever species rises from the ashes of our civilization, they will know that we did not go quietly. They will know that we stood against the darkness. He squared his shoulders. All ships advance. For Earth, for the coalition, for everyone who ever looked up at the stars and dared to hope. The coalition fleet moved forward. The battle began. It was slaughter on a scale beyond comprehension. Silence ships fired weapons that simply erased matter from existence. Coalition ships died by the thousands, their crews vaporized in instants. The darkness between stars was lit by the funeral pyres of entire fleets, but the coalition fought back. They fought with desperation. They fought with fury. They fought with the understanding that there was nowhere to run. And slowly, impossibly, they began to win, not through superior firepower, not through better technology, but through something the Silence had never encountered before: adaptation. Every species in the coalition brought something unique. The Velani contributed tactical genius, predicting Silence movements before they happened. The Corvani brought a willingness to sacrifice that matched humanity's own. Dozens of other species offered their strengths, their knowledge, their courage. Together, they found weaknesses the Silence did not know they had. General Thomas Ward watched the battle from a command bunker far behind the front lines. He was 83 years old, too old to fight, but not too old to contribute. "There," he said, pointing to a display. "That ship in the center. It is different from the others." His analysts studied the data. The ship was massive, ancient, and somehow connected to every other Silence vessel. "It is a command ship," one analyst said. "Or perhaps something more. The other ships seem to be drawing power from it." Ward nodded slowly. "Find a way to destroy it, whatever the cost." The order went out. A strike force was assembled. 50 ships, the best crews from every species. Their mission was simple: punch through the Silence fleet and destroy the command vessel. They knew they would not survive. Admiral Cole volunteered to lead the assault personally. His officers protested. He ignored them. "I did not ask anyone to do something I would not do myself," he said simply. "Prepare the strike force." The 50 ships broke away from the main fleet and accelerated toward the heart of the Silence armada. They were immediately targeted by thousands of enemy vessels. Ships began to die. 40 ships became 30. 30 became 20. 20 became 10. Cole watched his tactical display. As vessel after vessel went dark, friends, colleagues, heroes, all of them dying so that his ship could reach the target. 5 ships remained when they finally broke through to the command vessel. They were damaged beyond recognition. Their weapons were nearly depleted. Their crews were exhausted and wounded. It did not matter. Cole aimed his ship directly at the massive structure. Around him, the 4 surviving vessels did the same. All ships, ramming speed, detonate all remaining munitions on impact. There was no hesitation, no fear, just acceptance. 5 ships struck the command vessel simultaneously. The combined explosion tore through ancient systems that had functioned for billions of years. Something deep inside the structure began to fail, and across the battlefield, the Silence fleet stopped moving. Ships that had been firing went dark. Vessels that had been advancing drifted aimlessly. The connection that bound them together had been severed. The coalition fleet, battered and broken, surged forward to finish what the strike force had started. The Battle of the Rim lasted another 12 hours. When it ended, the Silence had been destroyed. 2 billion ancient ships reduced to debris. A threat that had ended countless civilizations, finally defeated. The cost was terrible. 2 million coalition vessels had been lost. Trillions of beings had died. Entire species had been pushed to the edge of extinction, but they had survived. General Thomas Ward received the news in his bunker. He listened silently as the reports came in. Victory, survival, hope. Then he closed his eyes and died. He was smiling. 1 year later, a ceremony was held on Earth. Representatives from every surviving coalition species gathered in a rebuilt city to honor the fallen and celebrate the living. Ambassador David Cross, now an old man with white hair and tired eyes, gave the final speech. "We came to the stars in fire and blood. We did not choose this path. It was forced upon us by a universe that saw us as prey. But we refused to be prey. We refused to accept that our story would end in someone else's victory. He looked out at the assembled representatives. Species that had once tried to destroy humanity. Species that had fought beside humanity against impossible odds. Today, we are not just humans. We are not just the coalition. We are the galaxy united. And we have proven something that will echo through history. Together, there is nothing we cannot overcome. He paused. To those who died, we owe everything. To those who survive, we owe a future worth living. Let us build that future together. The ceremony ended. But the work was just beginning. In the decades that followed, the coalition evolved into something new. A true galactic civilization with humanity at its heart. Borders that once divided species became bridges. Technologies were shared freely. Conflicts were resolved through negotiation rather than war. It was not perfect. Nothing ever is. But it was better than what came before. And in a small home on a rebuilt Earth, a young girl named Hope looked up at the stars. She was the great-granddaughter of Admiral James Cole. She carried his name as a reminder and his courage as an inheritance. Someday, she knew, she would travel to those stars. She would meet species her ancestors had never imagined. She would explore wonders beyond her wildest dreams, because that was what humanity did. They looked at the impossible and said, "We can do this." They looked at the darkness and said, "We will bring the light." They looked at the end and said, "This is just the beginning." The galaxy belonged to everyone now, but humanity would always remember where they came from. A small blue planet at the edge of known space. A species that was supposed to be conquered. A species that had conquered the stars instead. The end.